Side contributions. Do not pass the basket. This is a weekly step meeting. The format is as follows. The speaker is asked to talk for 25 to 30 minutes on that step of the week, followed by discussion or questions until 7. And you can find these weekly meetings on our YouTube page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and share. That brings us to the speaker portion of this meeting on this day, August 19, 2024, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, at the Monday night 6 p.m. Stay Alive Literature and Step Group at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Tonight's speaker is Andrew, and he's going to be sharing his experience, strength, and hope on Step 5. Please help me welcome Andrew.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick. My name's Andrew. I'm a recovered alcoholic.
Andrew.
It's good to be here. This is my third meeting in about 2.5 weeks, and by that I mean I went to a meeting a day the last 3 days. And that's part of me finding balance with being a new father. So I have a 10-month-old baby girl at home, and I don't think Step 5 warrants to get into that because I was recovered, but I'm telling you, there's so much joy in my life today, you know, and it also includes hitting the meetings when I can, you know. So I'm honored to be here and to have the opportunity to be here. So yeah, it's also an honor to talk about Step 5, and I thought, you know, it's 4 pages in the big book here. It starts into action. It starts out having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? So I want to kind of back up and talk about, there's another line I want to hit real quick, and it says, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have written an inventory, they're talking about Step 4, and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we are about to do and why we have to do it. This is assuming I know what I'm about to do and why I have to do it. I came into AA because I had a problem with my first drink. My first drink would lead to my second drink, you know? And anybody with half a brain would realize that the answer to that is don't take your first drink, right? If you have a problem with a physical allergy to alcohol, like if your second drink is the issue, then you don't take your first drink. If you have a problem with your first drink, that's a problem with your mind. And no one explained that to me, right? Like when I came into AA, I was beaten by alcohol, but I was unsurrendered. And when you ask somebody in AA who's got an answer and they're recovered, hey, can you explain this to me? And all they can read off me is how unsurrendered I am. What they can get is that I'm gauging how little of AA I actually have to do so I don't suffer from alcohol anymore. How little of this program do I have to do? I used to love when I heard a dude say, just do as few meetings as you can, and then when you drink, add a meeting. Right? Like that, I like that approach, you know? I was unsurrendered. I would come to AA and they're talking, like, I didn't know what they were talking about because I wasn't listening. I got arrested for robbing houses to support my drinking habit. And I got through this treatment alternative to street crime, which was a program they had. My last drink was June 12th, 1997. And part of the fallout from drinking and robbing houses to get the money to maintain the physical volume I was consuming involved being able to do treatment in AA as an alternative to doing time. And I went to AA and I used to have to get slip signed. I don't know what they were saying in those first meetings I was going to. What I do know is I had a bottom that when I sobered up and looked back at it, it was like, I was really uncomfortable. And going out in life without an answer to my alcoholism, like I didn't really know what the problem was. Like, and that's okay, because all I knew was that my drinking had gotten so bad, I thought if I stopped drinking, there'll be some kind of safe haven in that sobriety. And why did and what perpetuates that idea is that when you go into a meeting after you've been drinking the way I've been drinking and you're sober and you're surrounded by sober people who are smiling and like shaking hands and greeting me, that feels like a safe hour, you know? I wasn't listening to what was being said, but I knew that I didn't want to suffer from alcohol anymore. And AA was a safe hour. So I tried the Good Living program for 2 years, and in sobriety I wound up trying to take my own life. And by necessity, right? Like somebody's like, oh, my sponsor motivated me to do the steps. My sponsor is the greatest person that ever did the steps of AA, but he did not motivate me to do the steps. The pain of not doing AA motivated me to do the steps. Alcohol motivated me to do the steps. And I met my sponsor in Philadelphia in like 99 after a suicide attempt. And he laid the answer at my feet, right? I didn't know why anybody needed to do a fifth step or what I would hope to achieve from a fifth step. So just as background, why would I try to take my life if I had 2 years removed from alcohol? If my problem's alcohol and I stop drinking and I have 2 years of sobriety, like why am I still trying to take my life? And why do I call that alcoholism, right? It's so funny that the last 2 meetings I went to, one was a big book meeting in Doylestown, and one was a big book meeting in Skillman. And they both were about step 3, about the topic in the big book where they talk about running the show, right? And what happens when I stop drinking and I'm a real alcoholic? I don't suffer from my second drink anymore, right? But what happens is I fall into this pattern of trying to wrest comfort out of my life by managing the ever-loving hell out of it. Whether I'm aware I'm doing it or not, but trying to explain that I'm doing that is like trying to explain to a fish that there's water, you know? It's so ambiguous that I have no idea what you're talking about. And my sponsor, when he met me and I tried to take my life, he said, I know why you tried to do that, because you are a real alcoholic and you stop drinking, but you don't have an answer to what's really wrong with you. You don't really know what you suffer from. It's not a drink, you know? He took me through the steps, and the purpose of the steps, which is what I get from We Agnostics, which is part of my second step work. I'm going to read it. It comes from page 45. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, but where and how are we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Why do I need a higher power to solve my problem? And it says before that, we could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. That's my job to find that out on my own. What does that look like? Doing as little as I need to do in AA. Managing my life to get comfortable. What does comfort look like? It looks like when the ego has something going on, I try to like get my satisfaction out of that. But you know, an alcoholic who's unrecovered, like me, is beating my head against the wall trying to change my spiritual conditions with the circumstances around me, right? That's like entry-level spirituality 101. So I tried to stay sober and happy at the same time. Somehow I got the first part of the first step. I stopped drinking. And my life, even though it had good things, circumstances in it, like going to college. I dropped out of college because, you know, I had a relationship that went bad and I couldn't deal with the pain of that, and I was still stealing and all. Like, I was a lost soul. But I met my sponsor, and he explained to me that the problem of real alcoholism requires a spiritual answer. And whenever I'm ready to accept that, right? Whenever I'm ready to accept that I won't be able to marshal my will and surroundings into a tenable life, then I'll seek power in step 2. And when I seek power in step 2, they use this term, okay, now what's the first requirement of seeking power? Be convinced that any life run on self-will can't be a success. That sounds fundamentally wrong, right? Because I admire people who are successful and they have a hell of a lot of self-will, you know? And they're telling me that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. You know, what usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. They describe running the show as an alcoholic. Running the show is like the heartbeat of untreated alcoholism, right? Every single thing I'm out for is something I came up with that I think I need in my mind. In the 4th step, we call that ambitions. What were your ambitions? And my ambitions come from the same mind that's looking to like create these egoic satisfactions. I realize I'm getting kind of weird, but if you're a real alcoholic, you know you're following it. You know what it means. Because I would try to get something going on for myself. It wouldn't work out. I would get pissed off at everybody in the periphery, and I would drink over it, you know? So how do I lay that down? They say that if I make a decision to lay that down, then I get into action, and I write an inventory. And I start to, like, discover the water of running the show, you know? I'll share a dumb example, just because I used to ask people who, like I said, who would, what does this mean? What does that mean? And they would get that I'm trying to game AA. And you know what they would tell me? They would say, keep coming back, right? That's the answer I would get from the people who weren't ready to waste their time unpacking AA to me because they saw that I'm just gaming AA. They would say, keep coming back, you know? And then one day a man saw that in my eyes I had no answer and I was dying. And he explained this stuff to me, right? Like, he lovingly laid it at my feet, like it says, because there's nothing that can be pushed down the throat of a real alcoholic, you know? I will, like, immediately reject anything that you deliver to me that puts me in the corner. Immediately. I'm not taking it. And he didn't need me to do any of the stuff I was saying. But he convinced me that if I did these things, I would have this thing that he had. And it wasn't circumstances, it was just this sense of peace, you know? Like, I also admired him because he was very free of judgments and he was willing to help anybody. I was not that way, you know what I mean? Like, I was real aware of where I was sitting in the meeting and who I wasn't sitting near, you know? And he wasn't that way. He just kind of went everywhere and was everywhere he was in that moment. So he laid the AA work at my feet and he convinced me to write an inventory. And he showed me how. And an inventory is real simple. They give an example of it on page 65. And it's really a list of my resentments and my fears. And once I was done with that, I arrived at step 5, which is that I admit to God, to another alcoholic, and to myself the exact nature of my wrongs. It's another person, but they talk about that in the step. What if there's nobody available? This was written in 1939 when AA was like 100 people deep, right? There might not have always been another alcoholic. They were sending this book to LA and Canada, you know? A guy with 50 big books in a suitcase went to Ireland, you know? If you read the story of AA Comes of Age, they talk about AA before the traditions and how AA spread. So the book was written as instructions to a person who got this through the mail, right? If you don't have, but today we're so blessed and cursed. We're blessed because AA is everywhere, and we're cursed because we all think the work of building AA is done. But anyway, my sponsor was the person I chose to hear my inventory, because he understands what I need to do. I need to find a power greater than myself, and to find a power greater than myself, I need to be rid of self. And I've gone through the experience of trying to get sober other ways and it not having it work out. So I read my inventory to him, and there's something called, there's AA Big Book and then there's AA Wisdom. And my sponsor would always qualify everything he told me with, this is my experience, it's not from the Big Book. It's AA Wisdom. And there's a lot of AA wisdom on how to hear a 5th step, you know, and it's something I still work on and learn, because that's the second part I want to talk about. I'll break off into it. Like, how do I administer the 5th step for somebody, right? Like, how do I sit on the other side of a man who's trying to get recovered? What does that look like? Like, how do I coach somebody through it with my experience? But what he did for me was he said, I'll come to you wherever you're comfortable, which was not how we did the rest of the steps. I came to him when he said and where he said, you know, because that exudes surrender. And I would show up and he would tell me what I had to do, what I had to read, and I would do it. And I wrote an inventory, and he walked me through how to do it. I wrote my resentments. I inventoried those just the way it shows there. It looked exactly the same as this example. It was usually as definite as that example. And then I wrote my fears out the way it suggests, and then I wrote sex conducts. And then I prepared this inventory. And he came to my apartment, and it took 2 sessions of me reading I'm resentful at this person. They did this. It affected my pride, ambition, self-esteem, and then I shared with him where I was at fault. Was I being selfish? Was I being dishonest? Was I being inconsiderate? It's a lot to unpack to go through that, but once he got me seeing these things, because I'm not practiced at seeing that stuff, right? Where I want to go is I want to explain, like, what you did to me. You know why I want to explain it? Because I spent so much time and energy building a case against what you did to me, right? Against what I didn't get from whatever point in my life. And I value that case. It's like this amazing delusion that I came up with. Like, it's mine. Like, this is mine. So when I have to explain the dumb example. It's the stupidest example, right? But okay, so I sit down with my sponsor. I'm like, here's the resentment. A lot of them I'm like, no, I don't see where I was wrong. I don't see where I was wrong. Resistance. I don't see it. Of course I don't see it. I'm not built to see it. I'm not experienced in seeing it. He said, give me the dumbest resentment that your ego isn't all wrapped around. I said, okay. I had a roommate named Jared. I bought him some cherry Cokes and he drank them all. What could possibly be gotten from a stupid resentment like that? He said, okay, well, elaborate on step 2 a little bit on the second column. What happened? Well, he said I just bought cherry Cokes. I had a 12-pack in the fridge. I woke up. I was going to school. He said he was sick. I could hear in his voice his throat was hoarse and he was all congested. I said, I just bought a 12-pack of cherry Cokes. Help yourself. I went to school, came home. They were all gone. He said, all right, third column. How does that affect you? Okay, it affects my pride. Well, how so? Well, I don't like to be taken advantage of. Okay, fair enough. How else is it? Self-esteem. Like, why would he take advantage of me? Do I look a certain way where I look like a mark or something, like it was just somebody who nobody respects. Like, I don't respect you. I don't respect your property, right? Okay, how else does it affect you? Ambitions. I want to come home. I don't want to have that cherry Coke, This is stupid, but this was the only resentment that I wasn't like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. This was the only one. And my sponsor said, okay, let's look at the 4th column. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, frightened, self-seeking? And I wasn't coming up with it. And my sponsor said, well, let's look at what you said to him when you left. And I said, help yourself. And my sponsor said, that's what he did. Could you see dishonest there? I'm like, okay. I get it. And I also coupled it with telling him that, but let me tell you something, Jim. When I say like mi casa su casa, right? Like, that term, like my house is your house. It doesn't mean like this is your house. It means like, the grace is there, be prudent. He's like, I don't speak Spanish. I don't know what you're saying. Right? Like, I don't get it. Is there some concept that you have that no one else has? Is this something that's with you? I'm like, okay, dishonest. He's like, why would you say that to him? And it hit me. Oh my God, it hit me. Jared is sober. We go to the same home group. Honestly, like, it hit me. I want Jared to think I'm a good person so that other people will know I'm a good person or think that I'm a good person. Why would they think that? And what's the game that I'm playing with all that? The game is you want to make yourself look like somebody who sacrifices, but you don't really want to sacrifice. My sponsor said, that's great. There it is. You lied to him so you could be a good person without having to be a good person. That's all it is. That's what we're doing here. Now that you've gleaned that nugget from this stupid resentment, look back at that inventory that you've written a lot and tell me where else you see that happening. And I remember I put my head down to look at my notebook, and I couldn't bring my head back up because I didn't want him to see me crying. Because I saw it everywhere. That was like the thing that broke the dam, and then there's me going through life trying to get comfortable by managing everybody's expectation, everybody's view of me, how I look, how I want to look, how I want to be perceived, what I'm willing to give, what I'm not willing to give. And all of it's to get comfortable, in contrast of this constant sense of discomfort, you know? And there it was. I started to read this inventory to him, you know? It says, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. So there was two parts. One, I read my complete inventory to him, my sponsor, and he guided me through seeing things I maybe didn't see, and he did it with the humility of sharing his own experiences of having resentments. And it's rarefied air in AA to be able to do that. And I would bring my resentments to my sponsor in the spirit of doing my 10-step, and we would do mini 5th steps as it prescribes in step 10, like daily inventory. And I would learn how to see these things where I was bringing my defects and running the show. And the resentment is nothing more than proof that you're doing it. It feels like someone else is screwing me over, but it's really proof that I have these ambitions and the show's not coming off well. And it's worthwhile taking a look. And why resentments have to be if you're an alcoholic like me and your sobriety and your sanity depends upon a contact with a power greater than yourself like it does with me, having a resentment is like the #1 way to cut that power out of my life. A resentment is like the most opposite experience of a spiritual experience. A resentment is like the #1 manifestation of selfishness in my life. And I have to be free of it. I have no idea how to get rid of it. Luckily, I don't have to know. I don't have to plan. I don't have to avoid or mask or any of that managing stuff that I would do when I see a defect. We're followed with 6 and 7, which says we just ask for it to be removed and we move on. So the other part of step 5, I'll share my experience after, because there's promises to step 5. It says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. And I'll just say, it's like when I read my step 5 to my sponsor, it was 2 sessions. The first one was weird. The second one was like also weird. But when he left, I was already home. But when he left that second time, the reason they recommend that we take an hour and we sit still, it's like redressing a wound or something. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like it's a significant spiritual activity, and you feel it in your body. And the hour gives my mind and my spirit that time to like reorder everything that's been opened up. You know, I wouldn't recommend doing a 5th step and speaking at an AA meeting immediately after, you know. I wouldn't recommend doing a 5th step and then like getting on the 6 train. Do you know what I mean? I would recommend going home or being home and thanking God that I know I'm better and sitting still. And the ironic part is that this is the first time I was ever able to sit still. Because after I was done with my 5th step and reading my inventory, my sponsor, is there anything you ever held that you never told anybody? Yeah, you know, like I used to tell people I was from Trenton, New Jersey. I'm from Bordentown. After I was, you know, in my early sobriety, I lived in Philadelphia. People say, where are you from? I'd say Trenton. It's because it's managing the ego, like how I want to look. I'm from Bordentown. And I told him that, and I felt so ridiculous, you know? And there was a whole other group of people I told I was from Philadelphia. And it sounds ridiculous. You know the other thing I told him? I'm afraid of violence. And I have things that happened in my past. You wouldn't think that if you saw those things. But I have a deep, terrified feeling of violence. And you can't be a man in certain circumstances if you fear violence that way. I never realized like that was a fear and a delusion driving so much of my life that I had forgotten that was what was driving it. And there it was, pride free. So I sat for an hour, and I lived on 16th and South where I did my 5th step. So I called up Little Pete's, which was a diner on like 17th and Locust. And I ordered 2 eggs, sunny side up, home fries, and toast on wheat bread. And I was going to walk down to pick my order up and walk it back. And I walked out of my apartment, and I was walking up north on 16th Street, and I saw a Subaru or a Volvo. I think it had like Oregon plates, and it had bumper stickers with messages commensurate with an orange Subaru / Volvo from Oregon. You know where I'm going. And I saw the bumper sticker, and I read what was on it, and I didn't have this stabbing pin jab of a judgment in my head about it. Like I walked past it, and it was like okay to be there, and I'm okay to be here. And it's like that feeling, I called my sponsor because somebody in line took a ton of time in front of me. And I was like, I didn't react to it. That's one way to be sober. And the other way is like, I didn't even have anything to tell my sponsor. Right? Because there's absolutely nothing that happened wrong. Just things happening. Right? That's like what they're offering me. I can white knuckle it if I want. I could do, half measures and hopefully avail me something. I don't know. I could try it. That's available. But like my sponsor explained, like if you have nothing to even say, that's what we're offering you. I have nothing to say about that bumper sticker. Don't remember what it said. And that was like the first experience I had with really being free of my mind. When I'm free of my mind because I've freed selfishness enough for God to enter and give me an experience where I'm connected to right now, it's surprisingly easy to not drink a day at a time. It's surprisingly easy, right? That's what they're offering me through the work of AA. Not like, come around, get some advice, unsanctioned AA advice, or not to come around and like white knuckle 3 years together and, get on a trip and start sponsoring guys, and teaching them how to like, whatever. Like he offered me what was here. How am I doing on time?
You're free.
Yeah, we're there.
Awesome. So the last part I would want to say is I've done the 5th step a few times because having a conscious contact with a higher power is a daily reprieve. Like the answer of AA that I get from doing the steps and finding a power is finding it for a day, right? And there's been times in my sobriety that I've ebbed and flowed in and out of the answer. And as a result, I've revisited major house cleaning through 4 and 5 with new people living in different cities. And I've had a lot of experiences of being on both sides of the 5th step. I've had experiences where a guy, like, I'll just share, like, I had a notebook and he said, all right, give me your notebook. And he just kind of like proctored me through it. And, it felt awful. Another guy, so I had what I took from that, like no matter how far down the scale, like, everything is God can use, right? He uses that today. Because that guy, did you write your inventory? This guy was like, yeah, here it is. I'm like, I don't want to touch it. It's yours. Like, that's your inventory. I'm not touching it. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's all you, man. It's like your personal inventory. Just share it with me. Like, it's yours, And I'll never forget that feeling. And I've had guys who, man, focus is not our strong suit, I had to constantly, lovingly keep a 5th step on track. They have a spot in the 4th step where it says, when we write the first 3 columns, which is who got us all riled up and how it affected us. And then it says we return to the list that holds the key to the future. And then we resolutely look for our own part. There's preparation for that. Now I can't find it. Yeah, referring to our list, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. when we saw our faults, we listed them. There's preparation to getting in that mindset, and I try to make sure that I create an environment for that mindset. You know, they talk about a sick man prayer. You know, before I put the other person out of my mind, asking God, "This is a sick man. How can I be helpful to them?" You know, God save me from being angry. You know, trying to connect with that, and then go into reading my faults, you know, in that mindset. And then on the other side, you know, I have to be patient to hear a fifth step. You know, I have to be loving. I have to be open. I have to be humble to use my own experience to guide these things, you know. And most of all, like, whenever I'm about to hear a fifth step and I know that I'm not connected, I feel like a bit of a fraud, right? Like, because there's no way to sit on the other side of a person who's about to bring me every single thing they've hidden their whole entire life and drank over. I can't guide somebody through that as a channel for my higher power unless I'm connected with that higher power. So it actually brings me to like catching up on my work, you know, like, so that's all I got to share. Thank you.
Okay. My name's Nick. I'm an alcoholic. Okay. Please limit your sharing to 3 minutes. Please keep your shares related to the step if possible. If you feel like drinking or if you've had a drink today, please see me or speak to someone after the meeting. We ask you please refrain from the use of profanity. We are in a church and on a spiritual journey. And now the floor is now opening for personal shares.